Howdy y'all, and welcome back to another viewer variant video. In this series, quite simply, I test out and rate builds provided by viewers and subscribers to see how they stack up against my playstyle and previous builds. This is the chart I use to make these ratings. It's not really passing or failing, it's more nuanced than that. We continue our streak of Greek builds by presenting TZAV.GAMING's latest suggestion. It seems to be a class dedicated to Chris Kyle, the decorated war veteran and the focus of the movie and book American Sniper. I'm just guessing on this because it features a sniper build of the SPR-208 and a classic American M4A1 that he probably used. This build should be pretty interesting, so we'll see how I like playing with it. Before I get into the meat of this, I'd like to remind you all to like this video and subscribe for more Modern Warfare content if you do indeed end up enjoying this video. If you don't enjoy it and make it all the way to the end though, perhaps the suggested video at the end may be a better fit for you. Don't be afraid to try it out, so let's get into this sandy sniper class. For the long-ranged SPR-208 build, we have the Kyle R. This build starts off with the monolithic suppressor for boosted damage range and sound suppression. The variable zoom scope allows for a variety of visual engagement ranges while fairly heavily reducing our ADS speed. The SLR Overseer stock improves recoil control and stability at the cost of further ADS speed loss and a strafe speed loss. 10-round magazines are next to double our ammo, losing mobility in the process. The bipod finishes this build off by improving our crouched and prone recoil control. Despite, yet again, stealing one of my names from a previous build, the Thunderclap is built differently than the one you'll find in the video in the top right corner of your screen. This build starts with the monolithic suppressor before using the 14.5-inch tack light barrel for better ADS speed. The tack laser doubles down on this boost as well as stabilizes our aim. The canted hybrid sight offers a variety of visual engagement ranges at the cost of ADS speed. And the Merc foregrip rounds this build off with the greatest recoil control boost as well as a hipfire boost, all at the cost of mobility. The specific perks for this class are as follows. Cold-blooded is used to avoid detection by kill streaks and thermal optics. Overkill is required to run the M4 with this weapon. Tracker is then used to be able to see where our enemies have been. For a more in-depth look at Tracker, click on the video in the top right corner of your screen or check the description for a link. Our tactical is a stim shot and our lethal is the classic frag grenade. I wasn't sure how I'd feel about this class. It's basically a reverse Warzone class for me. Typically, I'd run an AR then a sniper, but that typically doesn't matter. Where it does matter is in core domination, because every time you die, you have to re-rack around in the weapon you spawned with before being able to fire or swap to your secondary. When most fights are happening up close, you'll want the M4 most of the time. Whipping out the SPR only to be melted very soon after isn't a great feeling. Looking at these builds themselves, however, I don't think this SPR build is very good at all. The suppressor harms our ADS speed. The massive scope harms our ADS speed, and the Overseer stock, despite being my favorite stock, really harms our ADS speed. Now, while ADS speed isn't everything, it's definitely not something to ignore. You would think that with this build being as slow as it would make a good sniper, and that just isn't the case for me. I may have gotten too used to the Norma rounds that basically give this gun no bullet drop, but there are times when I'm well within what should be a reasonable range, I'm aiming at the target's chest, and I fire only to get a hit marker because it dropped to their gut. Even some headshots I line up drop to the lower torso. I've barely been able to get consistent one-shot kills with this build. On the other hand, the M4 Thunderclap is great. The canted hybrid sights aren't my favorite, but they seem to work well enough in most situations. The monolithic suppressor basically cancels out the downsides of the tack light barrel, and the tack laser keeps this build very snappy. The Merc foregrip works wonders when you have to hip fire and for keeping recoil low in general. Cold-blooded is great for avoiding kill streaks. Overkill is needed for this class in general. And Tracker is still my favorite third perk. Stims are what they are, and the frag performed well enough with bouncing around corners and cooking them to perfection. This class is honestly at both ends of the spectrum for me. For core domination, TZAV's Kyle R class gets itself a rocky 3 out of 10. Moving on to our ground war assessment, this build is more versatile than many other classes. The SPR, despite this build, is still good for taking out enemies very quickly. If you're sitting prone on a hill overlooking an objective, the bipod is going to help you stay on target very easily. The 10-round magazines could be argued to be useful for a large number of enemies, but when it seems to take me 2 shots to kill every time, I might as well be running the Norma rounds. The variable zoom scope is probably not a great choice given how slowly this build ADSs. What I mean by that is, you don't want to be hard scoping for extended periods of time because of how visible the scope glint makes you. The longer it takes to aim, the longer you're exposed. When it comes to taking buildings and fighting like a regular soldier, the Thunderclap performs admirably again. However, here you really start to notice the downsides of the tac light barrel in terms of bullet velocity. Up close, this M4 works just fine. When you're fighting down the street though, or across a field, this can be a little tougher. Plus, given how suboptimal the Kyle R build is, you might even just be better switching to the higher zoom on your hybrid. For Ground War, these SPR and M4A1 builds earn themselves a 4 out of 10. Honestly, this build initially had a very low rating for Warzone because I had the worst plunder match I've had in a while testing this class out. I couldn't seem to outshoot anyone, and the SPR's bullet drop was just abysmal. However, upon a second attempt, I became more lenient on this class. Up close, the Thunderclap is more than capable of dealing with one or maybe two opponents. The Kyle R is honestly a terrible sniper. For longer ranging enemies, even some I tried to hit at medium range, the bullet drop made a headshot into a far less deadly torso shot. I don't think this build needs the variable zoom scope, because you'll never be using it at ranges where those levels of zoom are effective. That being said, the low ammo capacity and the reduced range of the Thunderclap also made this build struggle after the introduction of armor into the combat equation. In general, this class just isn't made for Warzone. I did get good footage, as you can all see in the background, but man, this build needs some work for this mode. Stims aren't really worth using in Warzone in my opinion, but the frag grenade was an alright choice. Cold-blooded was less useful here because who uses thermals anymore? Overkill is necessary, and Tracker is useful up close, but then you have to rely on the Thunderclap. Where this class is too slow in core domination, this build also lacks the range and ammo capacity to be truly effective in Warzone. This SPR-208 M4 combo racks up a 2 out of 10 for Warzone and Plunder. I knew my lucky streak had to end eventually. Many of my recent viewer variants have had builds racking up easy 7s, 8s, or even higher, but it had to end at some point. I truly dislike this build. The look is cool and the style of the class is something I can appreciate, but this combo of weapons and their specific builds just do not work for me. The Kyle R SPR is honestly, and sorry for being harsh here, it's honestly one of the worst SPR builds I have ever used. The monolithic suppressor and bipod are fine, both aren't bad choices. The variable zoom scope also, when combined with the Lapua or Norma rounds, is also not a bad choice, but combining the variable zoom scope with the Overseer stock leads to a sniper, I use that term loosely, with very bad ADS speed. The 10-round magazines do nothing to help the base SPR's poor range and bullet drop. If the Norma or Lapua rounds had been used instead, I would have been way more lenient on this build. It's too slow for core domination, does a little better in ground war since you have a safety of distance combined with one-shot capabilities of the weapon, but in Warzone, where headshots are all that matter, this build lacks the range and speed. Thunderclap is a solid build overall. It's definitely built more for core domination, but it does okay in ground war as well. Up close in Warzone, this weapon melts, but if you try to push out this weapon's range, you'll definitely feel the downsides of the base mag and the light barrel. With a heavy heart, the final rating for TZAV's SPR and M4 class gets itself a 3 out of 10. I just can't push myself to give this class a higher rating. It definitely wasn't a troll class, but it was still thoroughly unenjoyable to use every single time I selected it. See folks, I can be objective about these classes, I'm not just being overly nice. TZAV, if I may, I'd like to make some suggestions. Drop the bipod for the long barrel and the 10-round mags for the Norma rounds on the Kyle R. For the Thunderclap, your M4, I'd just swap the light barrel with the Predator barrel and use the extra slot for 50-round mags. It'll keep the build suppressed, relatively quick, and with a good amount of ammo. The perks are fine, but I just can't get on board with you when it comes to cold-blooded. I just prefer other slot 1 perks. And so with that, I end this less than stellar viewer variant video. I'd like to thank you all for staying this long and for spending some time with little old me. I really appreciate all the time you put into my channel over the past year or so, because it gives me something to look forward to outside my daily grindhouse of a job. What'd you all think of this class from TZAV.GAMING? Was I too harsh? Was I too lenient on this class? Do you not even care because most of you aren't here anymore? Either way, let me know in the comments down below. I've been your host, Doodleman149. You've all been awesome. Never forget that, and I will see you later.